Very good morning to all of you who are here. Good morning or good afternoon. For this third of our series in general on voidness and compassion, just now we are wading our way through the voidness section, sunyata. And so for those of you joining us on YouTube as well, then good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. Very warm welcome. We are studying these views according to Khenpo Tsultrim Gyamtso's graduated stages of the path, in order that step by step we can build on this easiest to understand views and then go deeper and deeper until we reach, I can say, the most profound or the most convincing elaboration of the Buddha's intention, when we get to the views, well, that we'll get to at the end, and we'll see them, Rangtong, Shentong, and so on. But we're doing this so that we are better equipped to help our fellow beings. It's not just curiosity, it's a real heartfelt intention to both understand our own mind, understand reality, the world around us, people with their karma, what goes on, what goes down, out of our great love for everyone and a wish to help them properly, morally, and intelligently. So let's remind ourselves of this very pure, very noble intention, the Bodhisattva intention, in the usual way we do with our prayers. We take refuge in the Buddha, in the Dharma, and in the community of most noble minds, from this moment on until we reach the very heart of enlightenment. Through our practice of generosity and all 6 transcendent virtues, may we reach total awakening and every enlightened quality, to be able to truly help sentient beings so lost in samsara. May each and every being be well, live long, be healthy, be well provided for. May they have good friends and find respect. May they live in places of peace and plenty, and most of all, may they practice Dharma. May they each create the causes for these good circumstances to be their wealth in future lives. May they be free from suffering and from creating causes of future suffering. May they discover the natural, sacred well-being that's totally beyond suffering, and attain the great equanimity that's free of closeness or distance from anyone. Deyata shame shamawati shameta shatra kurim arajite karota keorite juwati Olloyani bishodani male malapana ye kukure kaka grase Grasana muki paramuki amuki shamdawane Sawa graha bandhanane nigrihedva Sawa bhava pravadina vimukta marapasha Savitva buddha mudra anugatita Sawa mariputsarita parishude Biga shantu Sawa mara kamane. Glorious Guru, source of all blessing, ever present above our head on lotus and moon seat, through your immense kindness, ever sustain us, that the accomplishments of body, speech, and mind flow from you, and we are one. So before we, just a moment, check something. Great. So before we plunge into the ongoing story of these 5 main stages of Buddhist view, which is the Tibetans looking back on Indian Buddhism with so many different schools, really so many. But today we're going to go on to Cittamatra. But when you look at Cittamatra, as it developed over the centuries in India, then it grew into branches of people with slightly different angles, and each branch grew into more branches because of a great scholar who thought and criticized and brought forward a new spin on the argument. So many different subtle variations. So this is Tibetans looking back on India and seeing all of them fall into really 4 main groups. And then in Tibet itself, we get the 5th, the Shentong group emerging, Shentong, Rangtong distinction. So that's what we're looking at during the questions last week. Neil asked about the Theravadins and whether they were rooted in one or the other of these Vaibhashikas or Sautrantikas that we were looking at in last week's talk. And the answer is not really. But to explain the not really, it gets complicated, but we have to pull right back and be very clear that all these different Buddhist schools have different views, sometimes quite different when we're looking at the philosophy of mind and apparent matter. But we all overlap, 90, 95, maybe more percent. We all want out of suffering for ourselves, for everybody. We all understand ego because of the kleshas, the mind poisons is the culprit. All of that's because of ignorance, and then the way to get out is through meditation, shamatha, insight, and so on. All that's the same. All that's the same. So we mustn't think of like radically different. Radically different is like religions that believe in a God and Buddhism. That's a big difference. It's a big difference when you look into not just the belief, but the implications. Huge difference. But within Buddhism, all these schools, so much overlap. And then Buddhism, as you know, is a path. It's a path of practice. And we're all doing very similar practices of being non-violent, being kind, being mindful, practicing meditation, developing wisdom, and so on, of no self. So we must remember that. But in the development of the different schools where there are variants, then the Theravada school was one relatively small school in India. And then it became bigger in Sri Lanka. And so when Tibetans look back at Indian Buddhism, they weren't really looking too much at Sri Lanka. And anyway, it wasn't until the 12th century, which is when Buddhism was disappearing from India, that Sri Lanka became uniquely Theravada and started sending missionaries and proselytizing over Southeast Asia, and it became huge like it is these days. Its influence is all over Southeast Asia. This wasn't the case in the first 1500, 1600 years of Dharma. So when we look at the Theravada school, it emerged in contrast with another group of schools called Sarvastivadin, and most of Tibetan, Chinese Buddhism, a lot of Indian Buddhism before it was wiped out in India, arose from the Sarvastivadin school. And it was different from Sarvastivadins and different from the Sautantrikas and the Vaibhashikas. But it was one small tradition in this, what we're looking at, the Tibetan analysis of Indian views. But that said, there's so much overlap. And Theravadins are very strong on Abhidharma, as are the Vaibhashikas, Sautantrikas. It's just shades of difference in interpretation. Please bear this in mind. Now, I want to ask you a question about a pharmacy, chemist shop, pharmacy. Which is the best medicine in a pharmacy? Well, is it the most expensive? Is it the one that's the hardest to produce? No. It's the medicine that corresponds to what's wrong with you. And if it's simply aspirin, it's simply aspirin or paracetamol or whatever it is. All teachings are remedial, remedies. So there is no best view. And if a view is very deep, very hard to understand intellectually, or hard to understand because you don't have the meditation experience yet to feel it, to resonate with it, then even though it might, in terms of intellectual score, be the highest or the truest view, if you can't get it, it's totally useless for you. So it's not the highest and best view. So we're on a path. Our view will change as we go along that path. Our view from the inside, because we'll start to understand. Pennies will drop, as they say in English. Lights will come on. We get it more and more. So please don't become elitist about views. And when Khenpo Tsultrim himself said, with each of these views, you have to put yourself 100% in it. Not 95% out of it and 5% looking at it, but staying entrenched in what you say is, this is the view of my tradition, this is the best view, it's the highest view. We have to go right inside it. It's a very good exercise. We do this in our training to overcome our kleshas. We put ourselves in the place of somebody else. We try and see life, feel it, how it really is for them. It's the way to compassion and loving kindness. Not seeing them from the outside with labels, but really living the life they're living in your mind. So we need to do this with each view, and you see each one makes total sense. Total sense. When you see the world as solid and big and matter, This view where the world is made of matter and atoms and particles, and that exists, and we're a wandering intelligence observing it, experiencing it, makes total sense and gives you a convincing conceptual basis for doing the real work, which is practice. Practice meditation, overcome your greed and other things, practice right conduct, softness, gentleness, all those things. That's the real path. The real path is not an intellectual path. In one of the sutras, very famous, the Buddha says, when a house is on fire, you don't sit down and try to analyze the nature of the fire and how it started. You need to get out. So the main thing is to follow the path. So we've seen last week, and these two main traditions, the Vaibhashika and Sautrantika, they have some interesting differences of analysis, which in a way are echoed. I sent out a document last week to those who have registered for this course by Graham Smetham, an article about quantum physics and Buddhist philosophy, which has been his speciality for many decades. And there, in quantum physics, I don't know if it's in that article, but you see these days there is a debate, or let's say curiosity, as to whether space-time exists or not, whether space and time is relative, or whether space-time is actually something like energy. Energy, or how can you say, can understand energy. Energy is everywhere. Energy is everything. But space-time is something or not. So the Vaibhashikas believe that space-time exists, or more accurately, that things, the material world, exists in time and space, which means that things persist. Like the tree outside your window. It was there yesterday, it's there today, it's growing, but it will be there tomorrow. So this thing, a tree, exists through time and space, that things can exist through time and space. The Sautrantikas, the second school we studied, don't believe that. They say, no, there can only be the present moment. That was the Buddha's teaching. And I think many of you who meditate, practice mindfulness, you have these magic moments when you realize, gosh, there's only the present. It sort of comes to life. You realize, you really feel it. This is all we have, this present moment. Past. It's not a bit gone, it's totally gone. There's not one bit of it anywhere. It's so gone, it couldn't be more gone. Even 3 seconds ago. Finished, disappeared, gone forever, never to come back. Future didn't happen yet. It's only now. This is a sort of very common big point in Buddhist practice and experience. So they say this is the Buddha's real teaching on impermanence. There is only the present moment. So they differ in their conceptual analysis of mind and matter in those respects. Now last week, where I finished, as always, a bit rushed, because I'm trying to cram too much in, where I finished was about the Sautrantikas and how they are not so interested in if you can break something down, either materially, actually take it apart, or conceptually, you can break it into components by thinking, then it's not ultimately existing. That the Cittamatra didn't agree with. They said, no, it's not so much that the ultimate existence, the ultimate being of something, is by its own function, or characteristics. Now, I don't think I made that clear enough last week. My fault, not your fault. I didn't make it clear enough. When we say its own characteristics, it's not a very good couple of words, because the word characteristic is automatically almost like a human thing. We think characteristics is what we experience of something. What are the characteristics of a rose? Rose, it smells like that, it looks like that, it's got thorns sticking out the side. For us, that is its characteristics. It's how humans experience a rose. We don't mean those characteristics. When we say its own characteristics, we mean its own isness, its own being, whatever that is, independent of humans' experience of it. If you read the article by Smethan that I read out, you see that gets really fascinating when he talks about different quantum physics views about how we are, we are small wave functions experiencing other wave functions inside one huge wave function. So therefore, there cannot be objective observation. That's one school's argument in physics and so on. So we're not talking about our impression, our experience of things. When we say their own characteristics, it's whatever they do when we're not around, whatever they are when they're not around. That's their own characteristics, not projected characteristics, their own characteristics. So, as far as we can tell, it looks like water flows down. Whether we're around or not, it kind of goes down. Near here, there's a very big freshwater source called Fontaine de Vaucluse, and the water comes up out the ground, and nobody knew where it came from. There were various geologists, there's a specialist name for that, but anyway, who had ideas, and so they all thought it comes from here or there, so many kilometers or hundreds of kilometers away. So they put different colored dyes in these various places inland, and then they waited, looking at the water coming out the hole to see whether it was green or purple or whatever. Eventually they found it came from rocks about 100 kilometers away. So it takes months or weeks, percolates down, slides along the places between rock layers, eventually comes up there. Why was I using that example? I've lost track. I was so excited about the tracing it. Yeah, it's what water does all by itself. So we can tell by that water, that seems to be what it does. So that kind of thing, fire, lightning will burn a forest even before humans were around, that kind of thing. What the isness is there, and through that isness, then there is this word function, which is also maybe not the best word, but it's a word we've got. So that fire functions as fire, and water functions as water. Water will never burn down a forest. Fire will. and then fire will never flow down to the sea. Fire goes up into the atmosphere. So things have their own natural isness, and that's the ultimate reality. What we get of it is relative reality. It's only what we get of it. So if you take, for example, a tree as an example, well, a tree for us is partly, maybe primarily, visual. It's what you see. It's sort of a big thing coming out the earth with branches and what we see as brown and green and leaves and so on. So take away the seer. Take away the shapes and colors, which are only there when a human being is standing. Take those away from whatever is there that's giving us that visual impression. Because it's not there, the colors aren't there. Colors are only what an eye sees, an animal or a human's eyes see. No eyes, no color. Now you might need a few hours to go out and sit in front of a tree and try and think, okay, so what is there without that shape and that color? Well, the shape you can also go along and touch. Even if you were blind, you could touch, you could feel the trunk and the shape and the texture and go up and feel where the branches come off. And then you could get to the leaves and you could touch the leaves, they'd be much finer and so on. Take away the touch. Because touch is what it feels like for bodies with nerves and nerve endings. Tree doesn't have that. That's what we humans experience when we touch a tree and take away the smell and take away the sound of the wind in the leaves. That's all our experience. So then what's there? Well, then we get to a very interesting place. Because we don't have our five senses. What are we left with? Thinking. So we say, well, there are the atoms. There's the energy. Well, what do you mean? What do you mean? Atoms and energy are human interpretations so we can explain the universe to us. But it's not really explaining the universe. We're explaining our experience of the universe to ourselves. So we've made up science and all the human explanations. Now, this course is a very frustrating course. We don't have time to explore anything in depth, and we certainly don't have time to go away and meditate, spend good time on retreat together, having a nice time with trees. We could go off for a few days and just chill out and take this point and give it 72 hours. We'll all just sit with trees. Ken said what he needed to say. Let's just sit and experience it. What's there? Other than our experience, what's really there? What is the tree's own isness, characteristics, being, function? We know its function for us. Woo! So this gets interesting, and it takes us on to a main point, very relevant to something I said earlier. There is only the now, okay? Only this living moment, which is called direct experience. So part of our what is called valid cognition is called direct valid cognition. Valid cognition means true appreciation by our consciousness. It's one of the definitions of ultimate reality, when there is no distortion, no mistake, no limitation, no clouding, when our consciousness is as aware as it can be, then things appearing to a clear consciousness are the ultimate reality. In a sense, this is as far as we can go. It's ultimate, it's the limit. Our human minds reach their limit when they're clear and they're experiencing as clearly or as purely as a human mind can. So that's called valid cognition. It's valid. When we're mistaken, distorted, or limited, it's invalid cognition. So we've got two types of valid cognition. Direct valid cognition, which is when a clear awareness experiences the living moment as it is. Direct, valid cognition. Then we get another sort of valid cognition, which is very different. This is our thinking about things, telling a story about things, and telling the truest story we possibly can. So like all the Buddha's teaching. Telling a story. Blah, blah, blah. Listen, listen, listen. Understand, understand. Put the ideas together. A story that explains the direct experience. There's a huge difference between the direct experience and the story that now explains, rationalizes, brings reason, brings logic. There's a big difference. Can you see the difference between the ideas about and the reality that they are about? So all these views, Sautrantikas, Vaibhashikas, Cittamatrin, Madhyamaka, Rantong, Shentong, and so on, are ideas. They have the limits of ideas. So when we get to practice, to Mahamudra, to Jetsun Milarepa, and he talks about the view, because lots of Geshes and Khenpos who came to see him, they're very much into the thinking part, and they want to know which view, which school are you, Mr. Milarepa, which school do you support, what is your view? And the way he presents the view is the way that things are seen, meaning known, understood, how one is aware when the mind is totally awake in the present moment. That's the view. It's not a blah, blah, blah view you can write down on paper. It's not a philosophical school. The view is a direct, truthful vision of reality, which is where our Buddhist path is taking us. It's called, for all the paths, Shravaka paths and Mahayana paths, we have 5 stages of the path. Stage 3 is direct insight. Direct insight. The breakthrough into living truth, not blah, blah, blah truth, living truth. And not just a little breakthrough for a few seconds, it's a non-return breakthrough. You will never be separate from a clear mind directly perceiving the truth from that moment on. So I wanted to make that difference between the thinking about, the story describing, the rationalization, the philosophy, and the direct living truthful experience is very, very important. So when we come back to now, we've almost finished the what used to be called the Hinayana schools. That term is not politically correct anymore. So now we say the foundation vehicle or the Shravaka schools, the ones that came from the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, meaning the basic message of the Buddha. We've seen they fall into those two main groups of the followers of the great treatise, the Vaibhashika, and the ones who returned to the sutras, the Cittamatra. The way they analyze mind and matter as two separate things is plenty enough for them to do what they need to do, which is to get out of suffering once and for all, forever, to attain nirvana. Nirvana means end of suffering. So for their path of freeing themselves from karma, the cause of karma, our mind poisons, the cause of the mind poisons, our ego delusion. That is the very essence of their path. It works. So many hundreds of them became totally free of samsara at the time of Buddha, under the Buddha, hundreds and hundreds. So it works, and all they needed was this view, with its emphasis on what we call sunyata times one, basic sunyata, the sunyata or the voidness of ego. There is no lasting me. There is no lasting self. That's what Buddha taught. Instead, we are a changing, interdependent story. So changing means impermanent. We're changing all the time. And how we change is through the power of cause and effect, conditioning, if you want to use that word, and especially the power of karma. We are an ever-changing stream, mind stream, until we're liberated, and then no more mind stream. So that's what we are. And this teaching of mind and matter, either the way the Vaibhashikas or the Sautrantikas understand it, is plenty enough to give you the wisdom component to support your meditation practice so that you become, in the end, an arhat. Excellent. So you can see that view is perfect. It's like paracetamol is perfect for a person with a headache, that kind of a headache. A headache that can be fixed by a paracetamol. Then it's perfect. And that they attain freedom from samsara, we should never look down on. Until you reach freedom from samsara. If you haven't reached freedom from samsara, how on earth can you look down on the Shravakas? Isn't that stupid? You're looking down on your betters. You're in samsara up to here. And you're saying, oh yes, but their view is not the highest view. They're just Shravakas, they're just Hinayana. My goodness me, how distorted can you get? I remember the 16th Karmapa, and I took him once to visit the Theravada temple in London, Burmese Vihara, the Thai Vihara. Because I was a new boy to Buddhism, or relatively new, I was thinking, here we are, the Tibetan Buddhists, the best, the Vajrayana, third turning of the wheel of Dharma and all of that. And these are Shravakas. And so I'm going in there with an arrogant attitude, and which of course the Karmapa knew. And so he turned round, he looked at me, and then he looked at the Buddha statue and the bhikkhus there, and he made the most sincere bow and showed his respect, not just for the Buddha statue, but for all the bhikkhus there and what they were doing. It was beautiful. It was beautiful. Very embarrassing for me. I felt like a little worm because he'd really given me, a direct teaching. That's his job. That was his job. He did it a lot of times and always. It's ego that gets in the way. So we should never be arrogant about views, because anyway, all views are blah, blah, blah. We're going to go way beyond that. But as long as you've got a view, as long as you are thinking and you've got an attitude and the way you see things and the way in which philosophical or Buddhist tradition you really feel they've got it, as long as we're going to have a view, then let's get the best one. Let's get the clearest one, the most truthful one. But at the same time, know that at one point, we have to leave the blah, blah, blah mind behind and go and find direct, enlightened, whatever you want to call it, mystical experience. So, one more thing to say about these foundation vehicle, the Shravakas, is they have to explain karma. And between the Vibhashikas, there are different views about how karma works. Some say the main power of karma, like when we make a karma, where that power is embedded like a seed in the ground that can later become a huge tree, like an acorn can become a huge mighty oak. Some say the ground is our consciousness, mind. Others say, no, there is something that happens in the material world as well. Again, in terms of like physics and thinking, philosophy of science, Western philosophy and so on, it's really, really interesting. It's like behind the cause and effect of the material world that we witness on a moment by moment. We see how the weather's made by pressure systems, heat over the sea and all of this, pressures, low pressure, high pressure, winds, El Nino and all the rest of it. We understand immediate cause and effect, but for them, what is the long-term big cause and effect pushing the universe around and making wars and peace and the karma of nations, the karma of countries, the karma of the planet and the ecology and everything. There's something that actually happens to the material universe that is the force behind it. Like Nikola Tesla, I can't say he was thinking about this, but he was convinced that there still was an ether maybe not in the sense of how scientists before thought of it, but a 1% of everything that remained unexplainable, and that was the power behind the universe. It's this kind of idea. So amongst the Shravakas, there are different ideas about how karma works, some more material, some more mental. Let's leave that one there. So now we move on to Mahayana. We have to leave the Shravakas and the two main Hinayana trends, and we're in Mahayana. And we have two main trends, Cittamatra and Madhyamaka. So mind only middle way. But before we go into the details, what is the... Just a second, I dropped something. Big difference between the Shravakas and the Mahayana. The Shravakas' goal and their understanding of their goal as being what the Buddha intended, what the Buddha's teaching was all about, is to get out of samsara by dismantling it, so there is no personal karma, there's no personal mind stream left. There is nothing but everlasting peace. That's how they understand the Buddha's teaching. In the Mahayana schools, which started to emerge after the Buddha's passing and developed over the centuries, the understanding of what we call the Buddha's intention, Siddhartha's intention, Shakyamuni's intention, is that it's possible to go further than that. Not just to free one's own being from suffering forever, but it's possible to do two things more. One is to be able to help more and more other beings, to help them to liberate themselves, and that our journey is not just for our own liberation, but is to help, in the end, hundreds of thousands of other beings when we become bodhisattvas and Buddha. So this is a hugely different possibility. It's not a journey where you just get out yourself. It's a journey where you acquire all the skills you'll need to help this person and this being and that being, who are all so different. So that's one. And then, in terms of understanding reality totally, truthfully, then we can go deeper than the Sautrantika and the Vaibhashika's views, and we can understand reality, really understand it, 100% understand it, so that what is called the veil of our ignorance is removed forever. There's nothing hidden to our clear awareness. So these are the two specialities of the Mahayana journey. One is to reach the ultimate truth, and it said this is mainly for our benefit, because we are not complete, we are not fulfilled, we haven't fulfilled our potential for understanding. We've grown, we've understood, but not everything. So we want what's called omniscience. Sounds good, sounds a bit too much maybe, sounds over the top, but really it means we want a totally clear mind. We want to overcome any limits to our confusion and ignorance. That's for our own benefit. And then the other thing is to be able to help others. That's for their benefit. So in order to do that, our basic practice is the same. We still need to meditate, practice shamatha, practice insight, vipassana. We still need absolutely beautiful moral conduct. But the wisdom component, there are three components to the Buddhist path: morality, meditation, wisdom. We all need the morality. Is the same for all of us, Shravakas, Mahayana. It's non-harm, bring benefit as much as is possible. Meditation is about taming the mind, and we do that through shamatha, vipassana. many techniques. The wisdom component, which is understanding the nature of reality, true nature, the truth, is the very different part in Mahayana. And it's based on sunyata, voidness. So this is voidness times 2, not just voidness of ego, that there is no lasting ego, but understanding the voidness of everything, everything, every single thing. So now, I remember last week I asked you to memorize the definition of shunyata, which I'm sure you can all just rattle off like that. Shunyata, or voidness, is the wisdom that knows the difference between what seems to be and what really is. It's always wisdom. It's not a state, not about spaciousness, anything like that. It's wisdom. So this in Mahayana goes much further. So this is where we plunge into this mind, matter, what's going on, what's all that universe out there, seemingly out there, that we experience, and what are we as an intelligence, as a consciousness. We need to get to the bottom of it, or the top of it, or every bit of it. We need to get it, understand it, undeludedly. So that's the Mahayana journey. And Mahayana breaks into these 2 main schools, which are Cittamatra and Madhyamaka. Cittamatra, Chitra means mind, Matra means merely, only, simply. Merely mind school, simply mind, only mind school. And their name comes from a very famous sutra, huge sutra. It's actually made up of lots of smaller sutras, very popular in China, called the Flower Adornment Sutra, or Avatamsaka. And so in there, then Buddha said, in whichever language he said it, which now when we look back maybe wasn't Sanskrit, because there were so many dialects in India. It wasn't Pali, that came later, but if it were in Sanskrit, he would have said Cittamatra. In English we have to say, he said, all is only mind. Not mind and matter. All is mind, or there's only mind. Now, you'll appreciate that the schools we looked at last week and today, you can explain to anyone, because for most people, I think, we are intelligence, we are a human intelligence in this material thing, which is a body, and moving through a material universe of other people's bodies and the elements at play as nature, as the cosmos. It makes a lot of, straightforward sense, because it's how it seems to be. The difference between what seems to be and what really is. So in the Shravaka schools, they say really is particles, atoms, really is function, but for them, there really is a material world. And in the mind-only school, they say, but no, it's only ever been mind. Now here we need, I think, more than 3 days together to go out and meditate and to realize that this objective seemingly objective world seems to be other than us, objective world isn't other than us and made of matter. It's our mind. Or rather, not our mind, it is mind. It is mind. How could it be anything else? Every thing, tree, rock, other human being, huge mountain, tiny insect, everything you ever experienced, you experienced. And what experienced it? Your mind. If it wasn't your mind, the insect or the mountain, you'd never know it. We're talking about reality here, each living moment. Like now, as you're looking at your screen and seeing me, like that. What is experiencing me? It's your mind, isn't it? If this wasn't happening in your mind, it's not happening for you. It's as simple as that. It's too simple. It's too simple. The rest is not direct experience, it's rationalization. It's telling us stories. Yes, but, you must exist out there in another country made of particles and sending waves through the airwaves and onto my screen, which is made of matter, and so on, for me to experience. Maybe, if you want to rationalize it like that. We're not talking about that. We're talking about this moment of experience of what seems to be other than you. Ken here, blah, 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 Ken, Saturday morning. Each second of it has to be in your mind, otherwise you're not getting anything. Everything you ever experienced as other than you has been your mind. Otherwise you didn't experience it. The very fact that we talk about experience means it's your mind. It's so simple. And when the penny drops, it's quite scary. And you want to say, yes, but isn't that, you want to rationalize because of our education, because of all the way our senses work. You want to tell yourself a story that denies what's happening immediately, right in front of your eyes, in front of your ears, in front of your nose. Everything we experience is our mind. How could it be anything else? So, like I said, I can't convince you with a few words. And we're looking at very advanced Buddhists, Shravakas, Pratyeka Buddhas, Vaibhashikas, and all of those, talking with Cittamatrans. We're talking about very, very clever people who've all meditated a lot, discussing this. But it's so simple. And the more you can separate direct experience from the explaining it to yourself story, the easier it becomes. A story is a story. There are people who think the earth is flat. There are people who think it's round. I don't think there's anyone who thinks it's cubic, but you never know. But there is a story. There are people who believe our planet was created a few thousand years ago, according to the Bible, and others who think it's been millions and millions of years, evolving from cosmic dust and explosions and so on. There are the endless stories. That complicates things. We're talking about something so simple. Whether it seems to be out there or in here, it's happening in your mind. So this is kind of the basic premise of the Cittamatra. There's no need to talk about matter, although it seems to be matter. There's no problem with that. No problem. Seems to be world. Fine, that's relative truth. That's how it is. That's the truth of how it is for people. They go out, to dig the garden. The soil's other, is made of matter. The spade they use to dig is solid, it's matter. That's how it seems to be. But we're talking about the actual experience when you're digging is in your mind. It's feelings, it's sights, it's sound. That's reality for us that we say is material. It seems to be material, but now we're looking at not seems to be world. What is it really? It's your mind. Like I say, I can't convince you, I'm just telling you what they think, right? You have to take this away and work with it for weeks, years, however long it takes. But in this long, fascinating journey of our own science and physics and then quantum physics over the last 200 years, then you probably heard of two very famous scientists in recent times. Schrödinger, the guy with the cat. His cat became more famous than him, I think. But Schrödinger, who was one of the great fathers of the quantum advance. And what's amazing with quantum physics, with the maths, with the calculations, the quantum models produce they correspond. The maths works out, the observations, scientific observations works out when we use a quantum model more than some pre-quantum models. So Schrödinger was one of the great fathers of quantum physics. He discovered what they call the fundamental quantum equation. And he says, as a conclusion, mind has erected an objective outside world out of its own stuff. Mind has erected an outside world, a seemingly objective outside world, out of its own stuff. So then we look at wave functions and so on, and see that. And then another very famous name, Max Planck, you may have heard of if you've heard of those great scientists. And he said, all matter originates and exists only by virtue of a force. And we must assume behind this force, this energy, the existence of conscious and intelligent mind. Mind is the matrix of all matter. Mind is the matrix of all matter. They are wonderful quotes. But anyway, we're not using science to validate Buddhism. We're looking at the Buddhists' ideas, but just to show that it's not so, how can you say, quaint and far-fetched and ancient as it might seem at first. It's not, I think there's a nice English word, solipsism. A solipsism, lovely word. So a solipsism would say it's all your mind. Cittamatrians are not saying that. Your, mine, I, me. We've dispensed with the illusion of I in our basic Buddhist teachings. We know there is no fixed I. There is only interdependence. So it's not saying it's all your mind. You didn't create Nicaragua. You didn't create everything that you experience is not all your mind. It's saying it's all mind. So within mind, there's a personal reality, there's a group reality, and the shared reality, common experience, but common mental experience, which means, if you've never been to my house in Scotland, I can tell you, get a plane there, a train there, then get a taxi, and then walk this, go down this path, and you'll end up in my house. Seems to be like a material reality, but your experience of my house, which won't be the same as my experience of my house when you go there, but it will be a lot of overlap. You'll see the same sort of furniture and so on. It's because we have common experience, shared experience, common karma, because we make karma together, so we experience results together. We make karma as individuals, as couples, as families, as social groups, as nations. So we experience the results in all those different ways. But all of it, every moment, is in our mind. So that's one thing we need to know about the Cittamatra, mind-only view. It is all mind, no matter. No need to talk about matter as reality, as seems to be, fine, as seems to be reality, relative truth, of course, seems like that. That's our common delusion, our common karma. But really and truly, every moment, out there or in here, has always been a mental experience. And the importance of this is that we are heading for enlightenment. If you had to change a material reality, like near Paris, they took a piece of land and they turned it into Disneyland, right? If we had to turn all the universe into a pure land, we would need an awful lot of excavators, manpower. It would be never ending. But when your mind changes, you're in heaven. Or if your mind changes badly, you're in hell. Even on this planet, amongst humans, let alone talking about other realities, there are people in absolute heaven, paradise. There are people living in hell because of their minds. Their minds. And then when we have interesting meditation experiences, sometimes the world comes to life, changes. We see worlds of light and wonder because our mind has changed. It's not as though there's been all these stage hands who came and changed everything around us for a few moments and then changed it back to how it was when we come down from the experience. Your mind changes, the relative world changes. If you are in a very bad state of mind, you're psychotic and so on. Really, it's like being in hell. Everything is a threat. People aren't threatening you, but because your mind feels threatened, you experience people as threatening, and so on. So everything out there in here is mind. Now, in those terms, the Cittamatrans have a threefold analysis of mind. And this will be familiar to many of you who've done my courses because it's come up a lot. And I bring it up a lot because it's a very, very useful model. And so mind has, you say, three aspects. There are three things going on. First is called dependent. It depends. It depends on your karma. This is a long-term story, a long-term changing story. The story changes, but it's very hard for you to change it. The story changes, but it's very hard for you to change it. And it's your past life karmas that have given you your present reality. So, like your body, you can't say, I don't like this one, I'm going to get another one. Of course, you can go and get plastic surgery, or you can exercise a lot, but it's limited. You can only do so much. You're definitely getting older. You won't get younger and younger most of the time. So this body that we have for 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 years is made by karma. The story is already written. You can't change it. The time of your death is already determined by your past karma. We might not know it, but it's programmed. Your parents in this life, you can't change. They were your parents, and their influence on you, very big, and siblings, and so on. The main people you meet in this life through the power of karma. And then your poverty or wealth, your health or sickness, big term, all of that is a story already written that is being played out on your screen. Now that's called the dependent reality because it depends on your past karma, and it's a product of interdependent origination, cause and effect. So that's one aspect, the dependent. That's happening right now. Another aspect that's happening right now is called imagination, the imagined or the projected. And it's how we are interpreting what is happening right now, how we're reacting to it. So it's your karma just now to be in a Ken Holmes talk, but how you're reacting to me, you might think what an idiot or what a brilliant man, or how you're reacting, how you're interpreting, how you're reading the present situation isn't determined by long-term karma. It's a much shorter-term mental karma, and it's a story we can change. So the long-term karma is a changing story we can't change, but the second aspect, the imagined, the interpretative, the projected, we can very much change. We can see friends as enemies, enemies as friends. We can see delicious as, disgusting, taste, or whatever. We can change it. And so that's called the imagined, because that's totally in the area of thoughts, concepts, mental habits of projection, reaction. So much of the Buddha's teachings about Dharma practice are focused on this area, because it's where we can do something and where we can change things quickly, change our whole attitude. And in the Bodhisattva teachings, for instance, misfortune is no longer misfortune, it's a blessing, because we can learn from it, we can purify our past karma from it, we welcome it. It says you are grateful for your enemies. They really show us inside ourselves where we have anger, resent, and jealousy, self-pity, all these mind poisons. We say, thank you. Without you, I'd never have known this. My friends won't tell me this, but your enemies might make it very, very clear. So we're grateful for what other people will call misfortune. We become poor, and we learn to be really grateful with little things, just to be able to breathe one breath of air. to see a sunrise or something. It becomes so beautiful. So this is about how we relate to what can't be changed in our lives. That's called the imagined. That's aspect 2. And then aspect 3 is changeless. It is the true nature of this mind. Now remember, everything's mind here. Everything's mind. What is the truth of this mind? First of all, because the object that's being experienced as though it's separate, and the mind that's experiencing it, they're both mind. They're both the mind of this moment, of this instant. So in truth, they are non-dual. So we can go off and have another few interesting hours or days or weeks, and as we have done in some retreats, and we can look at a yellow wall, and it feels like I'm looking at a yellow wall, because that's the blah, blah, blah. That's the rationalization. They're the words, the story in our head. But when you are actually in that moment of yellowness of the wall, there's no inside or outside. There's no this side or that side. There's no subject or object. They're just yellow. Yellow experience in the moment. All the rest is a habitual and harmful story of duality. So the ultimate truth is, first of all, non-dual. It doesn't have the two sides. But then as we explore that ultimate truth through meditation, it has, we discover bit by bit, all the qualities of peace and wisdom and compassion and so on. So the ultimate nature of this mind is called its changeless nature. Its changeless nature. So whatever is happening momentarily because of our karma, which seems to be dualistic, and then it's gone forever. Then there's another seemingly dualistic moment, then it's gone forever, and we're completely wrapped up in that story, caught up, where we're like kids in front of a TV, we're completely fascinated, gone inside it. But when we learn to disintoxicate ourselves through meditation, through shamatha, through vipassana, then we find the nature of this mind that's relatively having the dualistic experience. That nature never changes. It's totally pure, totally clear. And inside there we will find the blessing of all the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas. So this Cittamatran school, and where did it start? It started mainly with the two brothers, Asanga and Vasubandhu. So we're looking roughly 4th century of our era. That's 1600 years ago. And then their Asanga had the main insights, and his brother Vasubandhu, who was also very awakened, is the main one writing the texts, putting, how can you say, the thinking, the theory, the insight into a very famous text. Vasubandhu, very great writer. And then the followers of his writing over the coming centuries developed various schools of the mind only. But it's no coincidence that Asanga is also the one who gave us the Buddha nature teachings about the pure, awakened nature of mind. Depending on which great masters you listen to, either you'll say that Asanga and Vasubandhu started the Cittamatra movement, or you'll see them above and beyond that as having just written what they wrote and that a Cittamatran school developed on the basis. And they weren't out to start another school. Where were they? Well, they traveled in India, but they were mainly up in the northwest in Kashmir. And we're looking again at that most amazing area in the northwest, Kashmir, Gandhara, Swat Valley, where so much of Mahayana and Vajrayana evolved and influenced the Northern Asia, Tibet, China. It's an incredible place, an incredible time and place in Buddhist history. So anyway, Asanga and Vasubandhu give us this threefold analysis of our mind. It is so useful to start to untangle in your practice, in your mindfulness, what's actually happening in this moment and the story we tell ourselves about it. And to realize it's just a narrative. It's a very important narrative. Based on that, the human world goes round in every way. What is that thing children do in England? I don't know, when they pull the petals off a flower. She loves me not. She loves me not. It's ideas, the story we tell ourselves about people, about events, about life. We can change it. And then the direct experience of it can be a springboard. We've got the Olympics at the moment, the Paralympics. Sometimes they use a springboard, these amazing athletes go run, then they go bounce on something, and then they can do like this, all sorts of flip-flops and things. Springboards, amazing thing. So the living present moment, beyond the blah, 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 is our springboard to enlightened meditation experience. A lot we can do in those first two areas to discover the third area, which is our changeless Buddha nature, or the purity that's in each and every one of our minds. But the main point of the Cittamatran that we're looking at here is about it's all mind. Mind has those three components: its true nature, and then on a relative level, the dependent karmic nature and the interpretative imaginary nature. And then whereas the Shravaka traditions talked about 6 consciousnesses: seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touch, and mental consciousness, which we looked at in the Abhidharma course we had recently. Whereas they talk about those 6, the Cittamatran add 2 more, which are 2 aspects of 6 consciousness. It's not like 2 more consciousnesses, 2 separate things. 2 very important aspects of 6th consciousness. 1, 7th consciousness. 7th consciousness does 2 things all the time, every moment until we get liberated, relatively liberated. It splits a single mind experience into 2 sides: an illusion of me and it, subject and object, perceiver, perceived, me and you, us and them. That's the blah, 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 that's the imaginary projected part, but it's very subtle. There's not just the blah, blah, blah rationalization, but there's an actual feeling of two-sidedness, mind and matter, inside, outside. There's an actual feeling of that every moment. It's a delusion, but it happens every moment. unnecessary. And once there's me and there's you, that's where the trouble starts. Because I hate you, or I love you, or I want what you've got, or I feel better than you, or worse than you. I mean, if there was no me and you, it wouldn't quite be so bad. So seventh consciousness is this innate tendency of an unliberated mind to make a dualistic experience every moment, subject, object. The other thing it does is to sequence out of the dependent, the dependent karma, the karmic story we're experiencing moment after moment. It is the one that's pulling the next moment out of the box as it gets rid of the present moment. Why does our mind go from this to that? If you observed your mind in meditation, it's crazy sometimes. It just goes from this to that, until we learn to harness the craziness and take some control of our own mind. But until we do, there's a puppet master that's pulling out this, that, this, that. That's also seventh consciousness. So it's called deforming consciousness, dualistic deformation, and then the sequencing. It's very important in the story of our making karma, making samsara. So that's why the Cittamatrins, who see everything as mind, focus very much on this aspect of mind. Now, we can't go there, there's not the time, and it's a big topic. And it may seem fairly primitive to you, but, for instance, and it's a bit difficult these days too, where we have so much gender sensitivity and so on. But, for instance, in the early Sangha, male Sangha, they would say, women are the problem. So stay away from them. Get into a monastery, close the doors, close the windows. Don't see them, hear them, smell them, think about them. Or think about them, you can't stop, but it becomes memory. Or ice cream's the problem, because we're tempted by it. There's temptation out there. Temptation's all around us. So what do you need to do? Run away. Go to a hermitage. Go cut off your senses and go into your mind to find peace. Because out there it will always be temptation, distraction. So the blame is very much attributed to samsara. The world is just not a very helpful place to be. So you need to know that. It can sometimes be very crude, but very helpful. It really helps. Someone's got a problem with ice cream. You just stay away from ice cream trucks and ice cream stores, and you never go anywhere near them. And gradually the problem diminished, perhaps, hopefully. But with the mind only, it's very clear that the problem is really and truly in our minds, habits. So seventh consciousness is important. Eighth consciousness, the eighth one they talk about, is called storehouse consciousness. And so before we saw with the Shravakas, how do you explain karma? Is there something that actually happens to the material universe to make karma come true? To make countries that made war on another country, for those people to be reborn, where people make war on them? How does the material side of all that work? Some say there's some programming influence that's injected into the material world that drives it around. It's like Max Planck said, we must assume there is an intelligence behind the seeming workings of this material universe. So the eighth consciousness, because now everything is mind, is to explain how karma is stored in the mind. So we'll come back to that in 2 weeks' time. Now we've finished for today, and finished the, you say, the formal teaching for today. But there's more to be said about Cittamatra before we go on to Madhyamaka. So let's dedicate anything that was good. May whatever virtue was created by this session contribute to the state of omniscience being attained by the main enemy, mind's defilements, being completely defeated. Through that, may each and every sentient being become free from the ocean of existence, troubled by the waves of rebirth, aging, sickness and death. May this precious bodhicitta arise in those in whom it's not arisen. May its development know no setbacks, and may it increase ever more and more. Through this virtue, may we quickly achieve Mahamudra and establish every single sentient being in that same accomplishment. Thank you very much. And now over to you if you've got any thing you'd like to contribute or question you'd like to ask.
Hi, Khenpo Ken. Thank you so much for teaching.
You're welcome.
I have a question about, I was able to understand your explanation of how we know ultimate truth is non-dual, or I was able to follow your explanation anyway, about how the mind is seeing an object, and what else could it be other than the mind that's seeing the subject and the object. But one thing you said was that one of the ultimate qualities of ultimate truth, you listed some of them: peace and wisdom and compassion.
Mm-hmm.
And then you didn't explain it so much. I guess I'm especially interested in how we know compassion is a quality of ultimate truth. Is there some way that we can know that, or is that something we'll just see it when we see it?
Yeah, mainly. There's three ways. There are three ways traditionally. One is we know it through scriptural authority. So when we have Buddha nature teachings, so Buddha nature means awakened nature of our mind, of everyone's mind, then they are quite thorough, they're very extensive. We mainly study it through Asanga's work on Buddha nature, the Mahayana Uttara Tantra Shastra. And in there are some 440 verses, very clearly, step by step, section by section, being precise about Buddha nature, Buddha qualities, enlightened activity, and so on. So in there, it says that the Buddha mind is not merely peace, but that it is wisdom and compassion and power. It actually lists three qualities: wisdom, compassion, power. And so we've got scriptural authority that tells us. So if we believe Maitreya, believe Asanga, then that is the nature of our mind. Through reasoning, then through all the world of logic, debate and reasoning, we can come to that conclusion too. But the main way, and certainly if we're on a kind of Mahamudra path, then is we will know it when we experience it. we'll experience it in the classical Mahayana path, Bodhisattva path, when we reach first Bodhisattva level. And from that time on, through all the 10 levels, and then afterwards Buddhahood, we're awakened to the truth. And you can't even say we're awakened, because there's no we left, there's no me left. There is just that truth. And it's clarity of wisdom and loving compassion are inseparable. It is a loving wisdom, different from anything we ever experienced before. So it's not like compassion as we know it, which is dualistic. We feel compassion for other beings, we generate compassion for seemingly other. It is the loving compassion innate to what we might call the universe, or to everything these days, when the truth is known. And then what we see in the Buddha nature teachings is that it's because of the clarity, because of the wisdom, that there is spontaneous compassion. There couldn't be anything else. When clarity meets confusion and all the problems it causes people, how could there be anything else but loving care for them? But that's a human way of explaining it. The main thing is, when through meditation we reach first Bodhisattva level on the Bodhisattva path. If we look at the Vajrayana path, then it's when we get what some people call the pointing out of the nature of mind, when we get our first, through our guru's kindness, sharing of an experience of the nature of mind. And then when there's empowerment in the proper sense, not an empowerment ceremony, but when there's the original meaning of empowerment, it means there you are awakened to the truth of yourself, is pointing out. So through those, then we experience the wisdom and the love. It's quite nice. In Tibetan, the wisdom's Chen, Chenpa, and the loving kindness is Tsewa. And Chense, many people know about Chense. It's a name for Rinpoches, Dilgo Chense Rinpoche, and so on. The Chense are those two qualities, knowing and loving kindness. Does that help?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, if it really, you only really get it at the first bodhisattva level, I feel a lot better about not getting it yet.
Yeah, but we
Thank you.
get closer to it. Before that, we're on what's called this second of the 5 stages of the path. That second stage, called fusion or junction or integration, is we're getting closer and closer to it. So there's a real feeling of it. The first, that's second stage, is when we're really working on our sunyata, clarity. Has 4 sub-stages. The very first one of them is called warming up. And it says it's like if there's a huge fire, like a bonfire, and you approach it, first you can see it and then you move towards it, but there comes a point where you first feel the warmth. And so that feeling, the warmth of true shunyata. And then in Mahamudra and Dzogchen poetry, there's a beautiful phrase in Tibetan. It is Tongni Ninji Nyingpochen, which means a shunyata that has compassion as its very heart nature. Shunyata which has compassion as its heart nature. So is that no questions. I've not got anything more to say until 2 weeks' time. So it's not next week. Next week's our monthly Tonglen. And then 2 weeks' time, we come back to our study of these Buddhist views. So, last opportunity. Hello to those I didn't say hello to at the beginning. Hi, Alex, Leo, Anik, and Carol, all those who joined us.
We're all pondering on the isness of a tree.
Please do that. There was I never remember his name. It starts with a B, but there was a philosopher in the 1800s, Barker, Blakely, but I don't know, who said, if a tree falls down on a desert island, does it make a sound? Which led to an awful lot of discussion, because you say, of course it makes a sound, boom, even if there's nobody there to hear it, but there is no sound without ears.
Thank you, Ken.
Yep. Okay. Take good care.
Thank you, Ken. Take care.
Yep. Okay.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Thank you. Ciao,
Thank-
everyone.
Bye,
Thanks.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Ken.